Welcome to the Midstream News Podcast. I am Kevin Broom, and I'm here today with Stuart Saulters. We're going to talk about advocacy. There's always a lot going on Capitol Hill and in states. A regulatory, legislative. Stuart, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to be back. I feel like with all that's going on, this is a regular occurrence. So hopefully folks out there are benefiting from our conversations.
Yeah. I should have said back because this is already your third appearance. And this is in part because there is so much going on in terms of what we're doing in advocacy. So GPAC had a meeting. Why don't you start by first explaining what is GPAC and why does it matter?
Yeah. So the GPAC, or the Gas Pipeline Advisory Committee, all the OGs out there will get mad at me because there is another statutory name for the GPAC that I am not going to remember or recall at this moment. So we'll just stay with the GPAC. And there's actually an LPAC, a Liquid Pipeline Advisory Committee, which also has another statutory name. So all the regulatory compliance people out there, y'all can write us with comments about getting mad that we didn't name them by their formal names. But the GPAC and the LPAC are federal advisory committees that FEMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, has to review pipeline safety regulations, proposed rulemakings. And that's really their focus, is they review proposed pipeline safety regs before they become final. So in the process from, an idea to change a rule to a final rule, there's a lot of steps, and this is just one of the steps that happens. The GPAC is a unique body because it's made up of 15 individuals that are from either the government, the public, or industry. I think government is pretty self-explanatory. The public would be, individuals like former FEMSA administrators, former state regulators, or academia. So kind of folks that are, maybe had a career in the industry or had a career in regulation of pipeline safety, but have since, taken another step in life, so to speak. And then, of course, industry representatives from the various segments of the oil and natural gas supply chain. GPA Midstream is fortunate that we have a representative on the GPAC from a member company of ours. And so Robert Mitchell from Carrera Gas is on the GPAC. So very fortunate to have him be a part of that group and kind of share his expertise when it comes to gathering lines and processing plants.
Yeah,
Hopefully
Robert, I've gotten a chance to know Robert through the years, and they are very fortunate to have him.
Yep, absolutely. No, he's a great guy, full of wisdom, and so definitely very helpful in these committee meetings.
So my next question then is, what happened at the July meeting? What went on there?
Yeah, it was a big one. So FEMSA has been very busy. They've proposed a lot of changes to their regulations. And like I said, all of these proposed changes have to go before the GPAC. And so on July 30th, they reviewed 13 separate proposed rulemakings. They covered a wide range of topics, special permits, right-of-way patrols, erosion, incidental gathering lines, in-plant piping. So a lot of conversation about what the regulations should look like, industry input, regulator input, and as well as government input. The thing I'll say that has been a little different than maybe GPACs of the past. Personally, I think this is a good change. You still get that industry input, you get government input, you get public input, but you have a more efficient meeting because those GPAC members are just providing like guidelines and good thoughts for FEMSA to take back and put pen to paper. In the past, they've actually like written code language in the GPAC meeting. And it's, again, personal opinion, but I just don't think that's a good use of the GPAC members' time. I think they can convey the sense of what they want to see a regulation look like. And then the FEMSA rulemaking staff can take that and change it. We as a trade association have the opportunity to comment after the GPAC. And so we will comment with changes in the regulatory text of what we want it to look like. So there's opportunities for folks to provide changes to what regulatory text could look like, but It's just more high level kind of general concept ideas that these GPAC members are conveying about the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what's next? What's coming next from GPAC from FEMSA? I mean, you talked about there's 13 different rules that they reviewed there. So what's likely to happen? What will happen?
Yeah. So now PHMSA will take that input. Like I said, they'll take the comments that are submitted post GPAC meeting and come out with the final rule. So there's a couple things that'll have to happen, of course. Like you'll have to provide, you'll have to send the final rule or the draft final rule to the secretary, Secretary of Transportation. He'll have to sign off on it. You'll have to send it to the Office of Management and Budget, which is at the White House. They'll have to sign off on it. And so there's a couple of steps, but PHMSA now taking those 13 rules that were reviewed and making them final and moving the process along.
So all 13 are going to get finalized.
Yep. So, and I mean, it was a lot, but like some of this is more housekeeping, if you want to call it that. I mean, just kind of, this is not one that was talked about, but just as an example, there was still fax numbers in the regulation. And so it's little things like that these rules are trying to address is more, and not all of them. Some of them were very substantial and there was good conversation with GPAC, but a lot of the 13 were more kind of housekeeping. So, wishful thinking maybe, but hopefully these will kind of go pretty quick.
All right, let's shift gears.
Yeah.
And why don't we talk actually about FERC next, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
So, well, first, everyone listening probably knows what FERC is, but just in case, I mean, you never know. We might get somebody who's new to the industry and they're trying to learn something. So what is FERC and, how does it relate to the midstream?
Yeah. So FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And so their responsibility, some people think of them as the economic regulator. So PHMSA is the safety regulator. FERC is the economic regulator. So they regulate the markets, that not necessarily commodity markets. Like there's a regulator for that, but they kind of regulate how, power, how gas is kind of, I don't want to say bought and sold, but just how, the interaction between like a supplier, a shipper, a pipeline company, and a utility, if that makes sense.
The issue that we're working on is the blanket certificate. So why don't you talk a little bit about what is the FERC blanket certificate rule and what are they proposing to change?
Yeah. And sorry, maybe I should have done a better job answering your first question. I'll say this, FERC's responsibility is to permit projects, interstate natural gas pipeline projects as an example. And that's where that economic regulator role comes in is they see a demand, a data center needs to be built, so there's a demand signal. And so it's just, so they look at all the analysis and say, okay, this pipeline needs to be built to meet this new demand. So that's kind of their role, is kind of helping look at the markets, making sure, supply is meeting demand, and obviously meeting demand in a way that is affordable for consumers, if that makes sense. So what we've commented on is their blanket certificate program. And so this just is, a lot of nuance with this, but just generally speaking, this just allows pipelines to be approved and constructed more efficiently. It's not that FERC is now skirting all of their responsibilities to protect the environment, to make sure energy is affordable to consumers. That stuff is still there. It's just this blanket certificate program is a more streamlined way to review projects, to analyze projects. And so we commented affirmatively. We thought what FERC was doing was supportive of the industry, supportive of getting the infrastructure our country needs built. And we were excited to see this change. A lot of the members that we work with have intrastate pipelines, so they may not benefit directly from the changes to the blanket certificate program, but very much so they will benefit indirectly because this will allow for more interstate infrastructure to be built. And so there's a lot of people that live in Texas where there's a lot of oil and natural gas, but there's also a lot of people that live elsewhere. And so you got to have that product get on pipelines to go to other states, other cities. And so this was a very valuable, as we commented, this was a positive thing for the industry. So we're excited to see it move forward.
Did we have any, suggestions or recommendations on ways that they could improve on the proposal that they've made?
Just a couple of like tweaks here and there. Nothing significant. I think a lot of what they commented was very positive, or we were supportive of it. I hesitate to offer because there was some kind of very wonky conversation we had, and it was more of just needed to talk to FERC's staff to better understand where they were coming from and what they put forward. And so, if anybody has any questions, contact me offline. I can share with you that, but for everybody else that's listening, you would probably fall asleep if I got into it. So,
All right. So I guess then what's next with this, and like what's the timetable for this becoming a final rule?
yep. So FERC is a regulator, just like PHMSA is a regulator. They got to go through their process, and so they're taking comments. They don't necessarily have advisory committees like PHMSA, but they will review all their comments and come back with a final order, and that'll kind of seal this one and make it official. So still a little bit of time before it becomes official, but I haven't looked a lot at the docket to see what other commenters may have said. I know from the industry, just like with a lot of these rulemakings, we as a trade association work with other energy trade associations. We coordinate with other energy trade associations. And so on this one, we were all pretty aligned on our feedback to FERC and that this was a positive step. So, there will be opposition, but I think for the most part, stakeholders were supportive of what FERC was trying to do here.
All right. Shifting gears again. Most
Yeah.
of what we do with advocacy is on Capitol Hill or in Washington, D.C. It's related to federal policy. But we've got a new one in New Mexico, and
Yeah.
this is obviously a state level regulation. So the issue here is New Mexico is working on some air regulations. So my first question is, why is New Mexico working on air regulations? Isn't this something that EPA regulates under the Clean Air Act?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So this is where,
I'm guessing this is the same question that the committee members have, right?
well, yeah, but it's also, we got to dust off our civics textbooks from high school here and recognize the role the federal government plays, recognize the role state governments play. And so federal governments set federal regulations through the Clean Air Act, but states have to implement the regulations through their programs. Those programs do have oversight from EPA. States put together what they call state implementation plans, and those have to be, to a certain degree approved by EPA. But it is the state's responsibility to execute and to regulate. And so I mean, there are some states that are a little more aggressive than others, as you can imagine. And there's also, I was chatting with a friend from Colorado. There's also just ways that the Clean Air Act is phrased and how emissions are categorized. I'll say all of my environmental committee members are going to be yelling at me for how I'm phrasing this, I'm sure, but we'll just kind of, I'll say it that way, hopefully, and it's understandable and not too in the weeds. But yeah, I mean, there are, the states have a responsibility. It's not just EPA. You can't just cede to the federal government. There are states that just adopt what the federal government puts forward as regulations, but for the most part, when it comes to air emissions, the states have their own rules and they implement those rules, and so they have the authority to go and put in rules to regulate air emissions.
Okay. So then the next question, of course, we've established New Mexico, they have the authority to do this. And so what are they proposing to do?
Yeah, it was a pretty aggressive proposal. I would say pretty impactful, negatively impactful for the industry if it is finalized as it was proposed. I think well, there's, I'll say a couple things. So, some people may remember the term super emitter. That was a proposal that was in some legislation here in DC. Congress proposed that EPA set up a super emitter program. That's since been put on hold, but now New Mexico is proposing a super emitter program. And what this means is that third parties will be able to identify large methane releases and notify the state, which would trigger operator responses to those releases. I know all of our members are working hard to mitigate releases. And if there are releases, respond to them. I think it just gets hairy when you have a third party that can come in and identify super emitters. This is a responsibility that should not be taken lightly, because our members don't take it lightly, right? So they're going to respond to any notification. But if there's like nuisance notifications, I don't know if I should phrase it that way, but I mean,
It's I think that's a fair characterization, that
right.
there are some people out there, there are some groups out there that will, if given authority, they will file a bunch of these complaints and basically to busy the companies and to bleed their resources. I mean, I think that's fair. That's been a tactic that some groups have used in the past. So it's not, I think it's not unfair to say that that is a possibility from this kind of a regulation. So anyway, carry on.
Yeah, no, and another thing I'll say too is there's just a lot of knowledge needed when you're categorizing and characterizing releases. I mean that I don't know New Mexico and all the industry in New Mexico, but I think about like the Houston Ship Channel, and a release in the Houston Ship Channel could be from a gas processing plant, but it could be from a refinery, or it could be from a chemical manufacturing facility, where there's heavy industry all piled together. It's hard to, especially with certain, identification technologies like satellites, it's hard to pinpoint you know, where that may be coming from, right? And so now, whoever third party calls into the state regulator is like, this operator had a release, go get them. Well, it could be, it could be from the guy down the street. It's just the way the wind has shifted it. Um, and so now it is a nuisance, and depending on the levels that this program sets at, I mean, you could have background stuff. So you could have like cows, right? Emissions from cows, I'll say. You can guess where those emissions might come from. But anyway, you could have that type of agriculture emission, right? Which is just kind of like shifted over a processing plant. And now, now lo and behold, we've got to go respond to that. So we just need to be careful that these regulations are practical and they really get at the problem, which I think this may not.
Yeah.
The other one I'll comment on is just, there were some pretty aggressive proposals to respond to leaks. And so again, none of our members are out there, ignoring leaks and not wanting to fix leaks, but it's just got to be practical and appropriate in terms of like identifying the leak and then going and fixing it, taking the right steps to fix it. Like you can't just go fix everything. You can't just drop everything and go fix everything. There needs to be a level of like risk base built into these requirements.
All right. So I'm not asking necessarily for prediction, just your professional view. What's likely to happen here? Are they going to take seriously our comments, or are they going to push forward with what they've proposed?
That's a good question. I do think they will take serious what we proposed. I kind of alluded to a coordination with other trade associations earlier. This is one where we were very closely coordinated with the New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. Basically, our comments were, hey, do what New Mexico Oil and Gas Association tells you to do, work with them. And so I'm hopeful that the good people at NMOGA, who have relationships with the NMED, which is the regulator there, can continue to build on those relationships and get to a good point. I'm in DC. It's all politics. So here is a situation where there's a gubernatorial election in New Mexico this year. And so there's a chance that the Secretary of the Environment, or whatever his title is down in New Mexico, will not be there in 2027 when this rule might finally become final. And so you may have that impact as well, that a new leadership change at the governor's mansion could impact this rule and what happens to it in the end.
Okay. Anything else that you need to share about what's going on in advocacy?
No, I think that's enough. It's a lot. But, as always, you know, whether it's the comments we write or the efforts we engage with on Capitol Hill, I mean, we love to have the member input. We need the member input, the member involvement. And so my plug, as always, is if you're not involved, please do get involved. If it's a colleague that you think would be a great fit in any of this work, send them my way. We want to get them involved. The expertise from our members is what we need to be successful.
All right. Well, we will be back soon with more advocacy updates and more GPA Midstream news and more conversations about what's going on in midstream on the Midstream News Podcast.